Chapter 6. Clara, the patient little invalid. In her home at Frankfurt, Clara, the little daughter of Mr. Sessemann, was lying on the invalid couch on which she spent her whole day, being wheeled in it from room to room. Her little face was thin and pale, and at this moment her two soft blue eyes were fixed on the clock, which seemed to her to go very slowly this day, and with a slight accent of impatience which was very rare with her, she asked, "Isn't it time yet, Miss Rottermyer?" This lady was sitting very upright at a small work-table, busy with her embroidery. She wore a dome-shaped headpiece, which made her look very solemn and dignified. For many years past, since Clara's mother had died, the housekeeping and the superintendence of the servants had been entrusted to Miss Rottermyer. The father, who was often away from home, left her in sole charge, with the condition only that his little daughter should have a voice in all matters, and that nothing should be done against her wish. As Clara was putting her impatient question for the second time, Dete and Heidi arrived at the front door. Tinette, the maid in dainty cap and apron, ushered them upstairs into the library. Dete remained standing politely near the door, still holding Heidi tightly by the hand, for she did not know what the child might take it into her head to do amid these new surroundings. Miss Rottermyer rose slowly, and went up to the new little companion for the daughter of the house, to see what she was like. She did not seem very pleased with her appearance. Heidi was dressed in her plain little woolen frock, and her hat was an old straw one, bent out of shape. The child looked innocently out from beneath it, gazing with unconcealed astonishment at the lady's towering headdress. "What is your name?" asked Miss Rottermyer, after examining the child for some minutes, while Heidi in return kept her eyes steadily fixed upon the lady. "Heidi!" she said in a clear, ringing voice. What? That's no Christian name for a child. You are not christened that. What name did they give you when you were baptized?" continued Miss Rottermyer.
"I do not remember,"
replied Heidi. "What a way to answer," said the lady, shaking her head. "Dete, is the child a simpleton or only saucy?" "If the lady will allow me, I will speak for the child, for she is very unaccustomed to strangers," said Dete, who had given Heidi a silent poke for making such an unsuitable answer. "She is certainly not stupid, nor yet saucy. She speaks exactly as she thinks. This is the first time she has ever been in a gentleman's house, and she does not know good manners. But she is very willing to learn. She was christened Adelaide, after her mother, my sister, who is now dead." "Well, that's a name that one can pronounce," remarked Miss Rottermyer. "But I must tell you, Dete, that I am astonished to see so young a child. I told you I wanted a companion of the same age as the young lady of the house, one who could share her lessons and all her other occupations. Miss Clara is now over 12. What age is this child?" "If the lady will allow me," began Dete again, in her usual fluent manner. "I myself had lost count of her exact age. She is certainly a little younger, but not much. I cannot say precisely, but I think she is 10 or thereabouts."
"Grandfather told me I was 8,
put in Heidi. Dete gave her another poke, but as the child had not the least idea why she did, so she was not at all confused. "What? Only 8?" cried Miss Rottermyer angrily. 4 years too young. Of what use is such a child? And what have you learned? What books did you have to learn from?"
"None,"
said Heidi. "How? What? How then did you learn to read?" continued the lady.
I have never learned to read, or Peter either, Heidi informed her.
Mercy upon us! You do not know how to read! Is it really so? Exclaimed Miss Rottermyer, greatly horrified. Is it possible? Not able to read? What have you learned, then?
Nothing,
said Heidi with unflinching truthfulness. Young woman, said the lady to Dete, this is not at all the sort of companion we want. How could you think of bringing me a child like this? But Dete was not to be put down so easily, and answered warmly, If you allow me, the child is exactly what I thought you required. She is unlike all other children, and I thought this child seemed as if made for the place. But I must go now, for my mistress will be waiting for me. If you will permit, I will come again soon and see how she is getting on. And with a bow, Dete quickly left the room and ran downstairs. Miss Rottermyer stood for a moment taken aback, and then ran after Dete, but she had disappeared out of the front door. Heidi remained where she had been standing since she first came in. Clara had looked on during the interview without speaking. Now she beckoned to Heidi and said, Come here. Heidi went up to her. Would you rather be called Heidi or Adelaide? Asked Clara.
I am never called anything but Heidi,
was the child's prompt answer. Then I shall always call you by that name, said Clara. It suits you. I have never heard it before, but neither have I ever seen a child like you before. Have you always had that short curly hair?
Yes, I think so,
said Heidi. Are you pleased to come to Frankfurt? Went on Clara.
No, but I shall go home again tomorrow and take grandmother a white loaf,
explained Heidi. Well, you are a funny child, exclaimed Clara. Don't you know that you were sent for to come here and stay with me and share my lessons? They are dreadfully dull, and I think the morning will never pass away. My tutor comes every morning at about 10 o'clock, and then we go on with lessons till 2, and it does seem such like a long time. Sometimes he takes up the book and holds it up close to his face, as if he were very short-sighted. But I know it's only because he wants to gape, and Miss Rottermyer takes her large handkerchief out also now and then, and covers her face with it, as if she were moved by what we had been reading. But that is only because she is longing to gape too. And I myself often want to gape, but I dare not, for if Miss Rottermyer sees me gaping, she runs off at once and fetches the cod liver oil, and says I must have a dose, as I am getting weak again, and the cod liver oil is horrible. But now it would be much more amusing, for I shall be able to lie back and listen while you learn to read. Heidi shook her head doubtfully when she heard of learning to read. Oh, nonsense, Heidi! Of course you must learn to read. Everybody must. And my tutor is very kind and never cross, and he will explain everything to you. But mind, when he explains anything to you, you won't be able to understand. But don't ask any questions, or else he will go on explaining, and you will understand less than ever. Later on, when you have learned more, and know about things yourself, then you will begin to understand what he meant. Miss Rottermyer now came back into the room. She had not been able to overtake Dete, and was evidently very much put out. She walked backwards and forwards in a state of agitation between the study and the dining room, and began scolding the butler. "Make haste, Sebastian, or we shall get no dinner to-day at all," she said. Then, hurrying out, she called to Tinette to see that the bedroom was prepared for the little girl, who had just arrived. Meanwhile, Sebastian had flung open the folding doors leading into the dining room with rather more noise than he needed, for he was feeling cross. although he dare not answer when Miss Rottermyer spoke to him. He went up to Clara's chair to wheel her into the next room. Heidi stood staring at him. Seeing her eyes fixed upon him, he suddenly growled out, "Well, what is there in me to stare at like that?" Which he certainly would not have done if he had been aware that Miss Rottermyer was just then entering the room.
"You look so like Peter,"
answered Heidi. The housekeeper clasped her hands in horror. "Is it possible?" she stammered half aloud. "She is now addressing the servant as if he were a friend. I could never have imagined such a child." Sebastian wheeled the couch into the dining room and helped Clara onto her chair. Miss Rottermyer took the seat beside her and made a sign to Heidi to take the one opposite. Beside Heidi's plate lay a nice white roll, and her eyes lighted up with pleasure as she saw it. When Sebastian came up to her side and handed her the dish of fish, she looked at the roll and asked,
"Can I have it?"
Sebastian nodded, and Heidi immediately seized the roll and put it into her pocket. Sebastian still remained standing behind Heidi. It was not his duty to speak, nor to move away until she had helped herself. Heidi looked wonderingly at him for a minute or two, and then said,
"Am I to eat some of that too?"
Sebastian nodded again.
"Give me some then,"
she said, looking calmly at her plate. "I see I shall have to teach you the first rules of behaviour," said the housekeeper with a sigh. "You must not speak to Sebastian at table or at any other time unless you have an order to give him, and then you are not to address him as if he was someone belonging to you. Never let me hear you speak to him in that way again. It is the same with Tinette, and for myself, you are to address me as you hear others doing. Clara must herself decide what you are to call her." "Why, Clara, of course," put in the latter. Then followed a long list of rules as to general behaviour, during the course of which Heidi's eyes gradually closed, for she had been up before 5 o'clock that morning and had had a long journey. She leaned back in her chair and fell fast asleep. Miss Rottermyer, having at last come to the end of her lecture, said, "Now, remember what I have said, Adelaide. Have you understood it all?" "Heidi has been asleep for ever so long," said Clara, her face rippling all over with amusement, for she had not had such an entertaining dinner for a long time. "It is really insupportable what one has to go through with this child!" exclaimed Miss Rottermyer in great indignation, and she rang the bell so violently that Tinette and Sebastian both came rushing in. But no noise was sufficient to wake Heidi, and it was with difficulty that they roused her sufficiently to get her to her bedroom. I don't know about you, but I'm like Clara here, rather amused by the whole difference with classes there, and I must admit, this is bringing back memories. When you're a child and you read this, when you read somebody like Miss Rottermyer, you kind of think to yourself, I don't want to get involved in that situation. But as an adult and reading it now, oh my word, I love playing her. Probably too much. Anyway, if you want to see a little bit more of Heidi and what she gets up to in the Sessemann's household, please tune in next time for Chapter 7 of Heidi by Johanna Spyri. My name's Sascha Cooper, and this has been Quarantine Kids Storytime. Take care of yourselves and stay safe out there. Bye-bye.